Exodus chapter 17. Say amen when you got it. Starting at verse 1. All the congregation of the people of Israel moved on from the wilderness of sin by stages, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." It's a bit rude. And Moses said to them, Why are you quarreling with me? Why do you test the Lord? But the people thirsted there for water. And the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people will drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, Psalm 95, because of the quarreling of the people of Israel, and because they tested the Lord by saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Let's deal with this text. So Israel is in the wilderness, and they get to a place that doesn't have any water. So naturally, they get thirsty. I get thirsty if I walk through the mall for too long, let alone the whole desert. Thirstiness is an uncomfortable feeling. I know some of us drink juice every day, and so we've gotten used to being perpetually dehydrated, but in general, it doesn't feel good not to have something to drink, especially if you're traveling through a whole wilderness. Your mouth all dry, your throat might hurt, need a couple cough drops, you get a headache. Everything starts to get on your nerves. Depending on how long you went without water, you start to feel fatigued. So naturally, I can see why Israel has an attitude. I can see why the body would begin to influence what they believed about God. At this point, Israel has a decision to make. They can let the temporary experience of discomfort in their bodies influence their confidence in God. Or they can let the temporary experience of discomfort in their bodies reveal their confidence in God. If they chose the latter, what would that have looked like? Like if they chose to have confidence in God in the wilderness while thirsty, how would this narrative have played out? So I want us to reimagine it for a second. I want us to reimagine Exodus 17 as if faith was present. Let's say they're walking through the wilderness all day, and they end up camping at Rephidim, right? And they noticed how thirsty they were. Remember, that's the problem. And looking around, they don't see any lakes. They don't see any wells. They don't see any rivers. They don't see any ponds. There are no natural sources of water available, which could be discouraging if their survival was dependent on their environment. But if their survival is dependent on God, then it doesn't matter where they are, they will be filled. Let's say they trusted God. Let's say they really believed that he was Jireh and they wanted to stir up their faith a little bit more. Let's say they chose to exhort, encourage one another about the faithfulness of the Lord. And still thirsty as ever, they begin to talk among themselves about how it wasn't that long ago when they were thirsty in the wilderness of Shur. And they found water and they couldn't drink it because it was bitter, but how God made it sweet. That's an exhortation. Or that time when they were fleeing Egypt and got to a body of water that they couldn't swim through. So God parted the sea so they could walk on dry land. That's an exhortation. Or if their memory served them right, they'd remember how even the first plague that God did in Egypt was that God turned every source of water in Egypt into blood. And if they meditated long enough and thought about the truth instead of their thirst, they'd have confidence to believe that if God can curse water, and if God can sweeten water, and if God can split water, then he can obviously create water where there is none, like he did in Genesis 1. When he created the water, when he hovered over the water, when he separated the water, when he gathered the water to make and create rivers and oceans and lakes. They didn't even know that one day Jesus would make water into wine, but that was neither here nor there. If only they exhortated themselves about the possibility of God's power, they would have had the confidence to need it, to trust God. And even now, in this moment, me detailing all of the possible exhortations Israel could have shared gave you a little confidence, right? Gave you a little confidence that you could trust God to do something as simple as give you water. You probably said to yourself, if I was in the wilderness and I was thirsty, I would have had confidence in God. But what if I told you that you don't have to be in a wilderness to be thirsty? All of you are thirsty for something, even if you have a bottle of water in your hand. The real question is, though, do you believe that God can quench it? When you discern your need, do you have the confidence in God that he can satisfy it? Or do you have confidence it's just misplaced in money, in sex, in gifts, in glory, in intoxicants, in witchcraft, in ministry, in missions, in intellect? What is your water exactly? And where do you get it from? If it comes from any other source than God, your thirst will always remain. So I exhort you to drink of the water that Jesus gives. And if you do, the promise of God is that you will never be thirsty again.